The 9th of Rabi' al-Awwal is a date surrounded by a variety of claims and traditions in Shia circles. Different communities observe it in different ways, and its significance is far from agreed upon. Let us take a closer look at the main views and the challenges that come with them. Point 1. Multiple opinions, no consensus. There are at least 4 or 5 different opinions about the day's significance. These include the beginning of the Imamate of al-Imam al-Mahdi after the death of al-Imam al-Askari, the death of the second caliph, Umar bin al-Khattab, the death of Omar bin Sa'd, commander at Karbala, the day of Intiqam al-Mukhtar against the killers of al-Imam al-Hussein, bringing happiness to Imam Zain al-Abidin. These reasons are loosely linked with this day being a source of joy for Sayyidah Fatima. Among these, the most dominant downfall of enemies narrative is tied to the death of the second caliph. Still, no single view commands majority acceptance. The absence of consensus itself should raise questions. In matters where factual truth is at stake, majority consensus can often be an indicator of authenticity. The fact that no consensus exists here undermines the reliability of each individual claim. Point 2. The common narration and its length. If one were to rely on textual evidence, the strongest case ties this day to the death of the second caliph. The most commonly cited narration is extremely long, describing scenes of joy among al-Bayt. Scholars of hadith warn that the longer a narration, the more chance there is of it containing content incorrectly ascribed to the Imam or Prophet. And simple common sense tells us no one can reproduce an entire speech word for word after hearing it once. Before we even dig deeper into the content of the narration, its chain or its original source, we can already raise a red flag due to its unusual length. Of course, this does not mean we dismiss narrations entirely because of length, but fabrications are easier to hide in long texts, and we must be especially careful when using them. Point 3. The source. Majmu' al-Ayad. Even more concerning is the earliest source of this narration, a book called Majmu' al-Ayad by Abu Sa'id Maymun bin al-Qasim al-Tabarani al-Nusayri, one of the important preachers of the Nusayriya sect, and was born about 30 years into the major occultation. This book contains highly problematic material, including supplications that call al-Imam Ali God, and claims that al-Imam al-Hussein was raised to heaven on Ashura, and that 10th of Muharram itself is a day of Eid. In fact, the Ashura narration appears only a couple of pages before the report about the 9th of Rabi' al-Awwal. The magnitude of the problem is immense. The very foundation of the narration is tied to a text and a sect that lie far outside the bounds of authentic Shi'i teachings. It is highly likely that this entire narration was fabricated by those who the Shia consider to be deviant exaggerators. Unfortunately, at some point this narration crept its way into later Shi'i works. This is not uncommon, and became commonly accepted amongst the scholars without proper scrutiny or by turning a blind eye. Point 4. The chain of narration. Suppose one were to ignore the problem of the source itself and only look at the chain. The report names transmitters such as Muhammad bin al-Ala al-Hamdani al-Wasti and Yahya bin Muhammad bin Jurayh al-Baghdadi. These individuals are completely unknown in the classical books of Rijal. Their anonymity makes it impossible to establish credibility and raises serious doubts about the report's authenticity. Point 5. The date of the second caliph's death. Historically, reports of the second caliph's death place it in al-Hujjah or Muharram, not in Rabi' al-Awwal. This makes it very difficult to firmly anchor the 9th of Rabi' al-Awwal to that event. Point 6. Problematic content. The narration itself is filled with exaggerated and problematic content. There are too many issues to list, but 2 are especially glaring. Lifting of the pen for 3 days. The narration claims that the recording angels suspend writing sins for everyone for 3 days around 9 Rabi' al-Awwal. This sweeping assertion has no basis in reliable sources and contradicts Quranic and fiqh principles of continuous moral accountability. Extreme polemics placed on the Prophet's tongue. The report has the Prophet Muhammad labeling a leading companion as Pharaoh of my household, alleging he distorted the Quran, changed the religion, burned the house of revelation, and that a Sayyidah Fatma's supplication for his death was answered on this day. This tone and content is far removed from all that we know about the Prophet and al-Bayt as impeccable guides with pristine morals and ethical values. Point 7. Multiple names for the day. The narration attributes more than 70 names to this day. Yom al-Istiraha, al-Ghadir al-Thani, Yom al-Baraka, Yom Farih al-Shia, Eid al-Fitr al-Thani, and many others. If the day truly carried such weight, we would expect far more evidence of the Imams and early Shia actually celebrating it. The gap between the grandiose titles and the silence of early history is telling. Point 8. The way of al-Bayt. It was not the way of the Prophet or the Imam to celebrate the deaths of their enemies, even the worst of them. The Prophet did not mark the death of Abu Jahl or Abu Lahab with festivities. To ascribe joy and celebration on such basis to al-Bayt contradicts their established character and practice. In fact, authentic reports show that al-Bayt held the broader Muslim community, al-Amma, those whom we now call Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, in high regard. They describe them as people of paradise and urge their followers to maintain cordial and respectful relations with them, so long as they did not harbor enmity toward Imam Ali and al-Bayt. The spirit of their guidance was unity, respect, and dignity, not rejoicing over the death of one of the leaders of the Muslims. The narration that portrays this day as one of celebration directly contradicts that ethos. In our opinion, and in light of the evidence provided, we believe that associating the narration with the al-Bayt is not only unfounded, incorrect, and lacking insight, it is tantamount to an attack on their lofty character. Unfortunately, in spite of all this, a staggering number of scholars continue to promote this narration from the pulpit, in gatherings and through videos.
मौला अली अलैहिस्सलाम ने हुज़ैफा यमानी को 9 रबीउल अव्वल के ईद के दिन के 72 नाम तालीम फरमाए।
का कुला खाओ तुम दोनों फ़इन्नहु यौमुन, इसलिए कि आज का दिन वो है यफ़क़तु फ़ीही फ़िरऔन अहले बैती, उम्मत अहले बैत के फ़िरऔन को आज मौत आ जाएगी।
لذلك يقولون أنه في هذا اليوم تفرح الزهرة بسبب مقتل هذا العدو الذي جعلها تفارق الحياة بعد أبيها سلام الله عليها.
وهو اليوم الذي طعن فيه أحد الذين ظلموا الزهراء عليه السلام وأسقط جنينها وعصرها بين الحائط والباب واعتدى عليها.
Among the Shia who reject this narrative, some instead point to the downfall of other enemies of al-Bayt as the true meaning behind this day. However, none of these explanations carry strong historical support. We will not be exploring those alternative views in this video, but anyone interested can find a detailed discussion by a contemporary scholar through the link in the description. The most widespread view regarding this day, however, ties it to the 12th Imam. This interpretation raises several important questions, which we will examine more closely in part 2 of this video. Thank you for watching.